I still remember that Monday morning. Seattle was covered in a thin mist of rain, and a dull white light reflected off the glass facade of Horizon Dynamics. I sat in a virtual meeting room with more than 30 little squares glowing on my Zoom screen. Martin Graves, the CEO, the founder, and the man who believed only he understood the word vision, was talking about the company's so called new era of innovation. His voice came through the speakers low, confident, and perfectly rehearsed. I could recite every line because most of the numbers flashing on his slides were written by me. We grew 40% in revenue last year, he declared, gesturing like a motivational speaker, thanks to our team's relentless creativity and commitment. The screen filled with polite smiles and clapping emojis. I sat still, arms folded, staring at the charts I had made. Martin's entire presentation came straight from the strategy report I'd sent him last week. I wasn't angry, I just felt empty. 4 years at Horizon had taught me to hear the silence between compliments. When Martin said the team, he meant himself. When he said we, he meant me, the CEO. The meeting ended with his usual line: Clara, you're truly the brain behind this project, but we'll need a different face at the table. The virtual room erupted in polite laughter. I smiled too. Just enough, never too much. That's the art of corporate survival, knowing when silence is safer than honesty. When everyone logged off, only Maya remained, the HR director and one of the few people I trusted in that building. She squinted at me through the webcam, eyes steady as always. You know what, Clara, she said. They're slowly replacing you with someone easier to control. You see that, right? I leaned back in my chair and stared at the ceiling. I see it. But I'm not worried. If they want to replace me, let them try. It's just not their turn to win yet. Maya smirked. You talk like this is a chess game. It is, I said softly. And it only has two moves. People think you're irrelevant until they realize you're the only one who can fix what they broke. I turned off the screen and looked out the fogged up window. Seattle was waking slowly under its gray veil, and I felt like part of that air, unseen, cold, but surrounding everything. That afternoon, Martin walked into my office holding a cup of coffee, smiling like he hadn't just stolen my work. He glanced at my monitor where the pulse chain system simulation was running. Still losing sleep over this thing, he asked, his tone halfway between teasing and praise. I think it deserves a little more time, I said. When you build something that could redefine the logistics industry, enough isn't enough. Martin nodded, eyes flicking over the data before settling on me. Clara, I know you're passionate, but we have to think about longevity, how this company will evolve. You work too much. Sometimes younger minds bring fresh perspectives. I smiled and closed my laptop. I'm sure you'll find plenty of fresh perspectives. In the meantime, who's doing the actual work? He chuckled, but his eyes stayed tight. That was when I saw it, the moment he started to view me as a threat. Not because I wanted his chair, but because I had stopped needing his approval. That evening, when the building emptied, I stayed behind. Only the projector's light filled the conference room, illuminating the AI model I had named Pulse Chain. It wasn't just a product. It was the company's pulse, its soul. I wrote the first lines of its algorithm back when Horizon could barely pay rent. I still remember that late night call from Martin. If you can make it work, we'll get investors. And I did. I brought them investors, offices, and recognition. But success never changed my place. I was still the brain, never the face. The one whose work spoke loudly, but whose name was whispered. Maya once told me, "You're the only person here they can't replace." And that's exactly why they'll try. She was right. When a woman becomes the backbone of a company built by men, she's not seen as an asset. She's seen as a threat to be managed. I saved my files, shut down the system, and stood up. Outside, the light from another building reflected my silhouette on the glass wall, a lone figure among thousands of bright windows. I placed my hand on the faint silver Horizon logo etched on the door. It shimmered weakly, like an old promise. I used to believe that if you did good work, they'd see you. Now I know that being seen isn't the same as being valued. I tidied my desk, stacked my notes, and left one final post-it on the screen. Be ready for everything, even being forgotten. Then I walked down the silent hallway, the sound of my heels echoing off the wooden floor. At the end of the corridor, I turned back once, I wasn't sure, or maybe I was, that Horizon was about to start a new chapter, one where they'd teach me a lesson about fairness. I just wasn't sure they were ready for how I'd answer. That night, at home, I opened the pulse chain file again, tracing every line of code. I knew that if they ever tried to take my work, they'd have to start from zero, learning not just how the system ran, but how to respect the one who built it. I closed my laptop, and before turning off the lights, I whispered to myself, calm and certain, I don't need to be seen, I just need them to remember who turned on the light. 3 days after that meeting, Martin sent out an email titled, Welcome the Next Generation of Leadership. I opened it and read line by line, the same polished words repeating themselves: innovation, youth, new energy. Only this time, my name was nowhere to be found. That afternoon, he called me up to the 14th floor, to the wide glass meeting room overlooking Seattle. Light spilled through the windows, reflecting our silhouettes on the table. Martin stood there beside a young man with bright eyes and a confident smile. Clara, this is Ethan Cole, he said, the son of Mark Cole from Aurora Ventures. Ethan will be joining the Pulse Chain team. I shook his hand. His grip was warm, but a little too firm, full of enthusiasm. Nice to meet you, he said. I read through the Pulse Chain documentation. Really impressive work. I smiled. Good, because the hard part is still waiting. Martin cut in, cheerful but pointed. You'll mentor him for a few weeks, Clara. After that, I'd like Ethan to take the lead on the next version. We could use a bit of young energy, you understand. I nodded, saying nothing. The message was clear. They weren't firing me. They were building a bridge for someone else to walk across. A few days later, Ethan quickly became the office favorite. Everyone praised his energy and openness. In meetings, he presented fresh ideas, copies of my own plans with a few words changed. Martin listened proudly, nodding like a father watching his prodigy shine. That week, the company held a strategy meeting. On the giant screen flashed the title, Project Pulse Chain 2.0, Lead by Ethan Cole. The room went quiet for a moment before the applause started. Martin's voice was bright and theatrical. We're entering a new era. Ethan will lead our technology innovation. I looked at the slides. Every line was my work from the past 6 months, now under someone else's name. After the meeting, Maya met me in the hallway. They just handed your project to an intern, she said. I know, I replied softly. They think I'll stay and teach him how to do it. Maya frowned. And are you going to? I gave her a thin smile. I'll do exactly what they expect, just not the way they think. Later that afternoon, Ethan knocked on my door. I hope you're not upset, he said. I'm only following Martin's instructions. I really want to learn from you. I looked at him calmly. That's fine. But remember this, loyalty isn't always the right thing. He hesitated, thanked me, and left. That night, I stayed late again. The office darkened as the hallway lights turned off one by one. I opened the Pulse Chain 2.0 file, the same plan I had written, now bearing someone else's name. I scrolled to the bottom, saw the line, prepared by C. Jensen, and deleted it. Then I saved a new copy and closed my laptop. On the desk, my ceramic mug caught the dim screen glow. The words carved into it read, She built what they brag about. I lifted it and smiled. A joke, but also the truth. That night at home, I poured a glass of wine and opened my laptop again. I reread my employment contract and the Pulse Chain intellectual property documents. In Clause 9.2, one small line stood out. Intellectual property remains with the original creator during the independent research phase before contract execution. I was the one who built the platform before Horizon ever signed funding. That meant they had usage rights, but not ownership. I scrolled to the customer license list. Every authorization was issued under the name C. Jensen. Each one was a wall I had unknowingly built to protect myself. If I left, they wouldn't be able to operate the system without my reauthorization. I printed all the documents, sealed them neatly in an envelope, and placed them in my drawer. On the lid, I stuck a small note. Open only when you need proof I was here. The next morning, I arrived earlier than usual. The city was still wrapped in fog, soft sunlight touching the glass walls. I brewed a cup of coffee and sat at my desk, surrounded by sticky notes, numbers, diagrams, lines of code, the world I had lived in for 4 years. A thought crossed my mind. Maybe it's time to stop saving things that don't deserve saving. That afternoon, Martin dropped by with Ethan. "We're announcing Pulse Chain 2.0 on Monday," he said excitedly. "Prepare the client data summary for Ethan, will you? He'll need it for the presentation." I nodded and jotted down his words. Martin patted my shoulder. "You're the backbone of this company, Clara. I know I can count on you. This is a great opportunity." I smiled faintly. For the company, maybe. For me, I already have mine. He didn't ask what I meant. He just smiled and left. I watched his reflection disappear down the hallway, his shadow stretching across the polished floor. What I felt wasn't anger. It was calm, almost peaceful, like everything had already been decided. That evening, I opened a new document titled Resignation. I typed slowly. I, Clara Jensen, hereby resign, effective 2 weeks from today. One sentence. No explanations, no apologies. I read it once more, then saved it in a private folder. When I shut down the computer, I looked around the office, dim light, empty chairs, papers neatly stacked. I was about to walk out of the place that had held me captive for 4 years. I wasn't afraid. I just felt light, as if I had finally set down a stone I once mistook for duty. I left the building as the rain began to fall. I didn't use an umbrella. Cold wind slipped through my hair, raindrops soaked into my coat, and I felt alive. One thought echoed in my head, sharp and unyielding. If they want innovation, then I'll show them what starting over really looks like. I submitted my resignation on Monday morning. The same day, Horizon announced Project Pulse Chain 2.0. I sent it straight to the legal department. No forwarding to Martin, no carbon copies to anyone else. When I pressed send, it felt like releasing a breath I'd been holding for years. Not because I wanted to leave, but because I was finally ready for them to understand the cost of losing something valuable. That day, the office buzzed with energy, laughter in the hallways, the echo of heels, keyboards clattering in rhythm. Everything revolved around Ethan, the star of the announcement. I watched him pass by, crisp suit, perfect tie, that eager face. Someone joked, "Clara must be proud," and he laughed, not realizing I was standing right behind him. I wasn't proud, and I wasn't sad either. I just saw it for what it was, the law of motion. When people stare too hard at the future, they forget who built the foundation beneath it. I packed my desk quietly, folding papers into boxes, slipping personal things into my bag. The ceramic mug that said, "She built what they brag about," came with me. I wasn't leaving in anger. I wanted to leave in silence, the kind that grows louder once they realize what went missing. That afternoon, Maya walked in and saw me packing. "You're really doing it?" she asked, her voice low but unsteady. I nodded. "I don't want to stay just to teach someone how to dismantle my work." She sat down, thoughtful. "I get it, but you're stepping into a game Martin never loses." I smiled faintly. "That's fine. I've never lost either." When she left, I stayed in the quiet. The office glowed with late afternoon light pouring through the glass. I opened my laptop and reviewed every document tied to Pulse Chain. That system wasn't just a product, it was thousands of sleepless hours, lines of code, and algorithms I had written long before Horizon ever funded me. They came in only after I'd built the core, and in the contract, I had kept ownership of the original intellectual property, something Martin never bothered to notice. I scrolled to the appendix and reread Clause 9.2, the one I'd insisted the lawyer include. The original author retains control over the software license and may revoke authorization if no longer employed by the company. When Martin signed it, he barely skimmed the page. "If you think it's necessary," he said. Back then, I was just being cautious. Now that caution had become my armor. I opened the system folder and checked the client license registry. Every entry listed my name as authorized liaison. If I left, all license renewals would require new approval, which meant that without my confirmation, Pulse Chain would stop operating in 30 days. I didn't want to harm anyone. I just didn't want them to take what they didn't understand. I stared at the screen for a long while. There was sadness, yes, but also peace. I wasn't out to destroy Horizon. I only wanted them to live with their choices. If they believed innovation came from youth, then they could manage it on their own. That night, I carried an envelope to my private attorney's office. Inside were the contracts, the license records, and a copy of the software copyright. He flipped through the papers, frowning. Are you sure you want full control? I nodded. I don't plan to use it for revenge, but if they try to erase me from history, I want proof I existed. Back home, I opened the pulse chain system one last time. Lines of code ran across the screen, whispering a language only I understood. I added a small verification line. Nothing illegal, just a trigger that required license confirmation when the system's administrator changed. No one could accuse me of breaking the law. The clause itself was part of the contract. I saved the file and leaned back. A part of me ached. I never wanted my creation to become a weapon, but sometimes the blade has to touch skin before people notice who's holding it. The next morning, Martin sent a company-wide email celebrating a new beginning. He didn't mention my name, not even a thank you. I smiled. He'd never understood that real power doesn't come from titles. It comes from knowing whether a system runs or stops. By noon, I received a confirmation email from legal approving my resignation, effective in 2 weeks. I signed electronically and added a final note at the bottom. Thank you for the chance to build something larger than myself. It wasn't sarcasm, I meant it. Horizon had taught me plenty, especially how quickly people forget who built their success. At 5 o'clock, I walked out carrying a small box, a team photo, the ceramic mug, and my notebook. Outside, Seattle's rain drizzled down the glass like streaks of fading memory. I didn't look back. I went straight to a small cafe on the corner, sat by the window, and opened my laptop. I registered the domain apexstrategyconsulting.com. When the message domain available appeared, I smiled. No revenge, just continuation, somewhere else, on my own terms. Before closing my computer, a message popped up from Maya. They just sent an internal memo, she wrote. Martin announced Ethan as the new project lead. Are you okay? I replied. I'm fine. Sometimes the only way to teach is to leave the classroom. That night, I stood by the window, watching the city lights ripple across the Seine. Water. I knew Horizon would soon realize what was waiting for them. But for now, I just felt calm. Some battles don't need to be fought to be won, as long as you know when to walk away. The Pulse Chain. 2.0 launch took place in Horizon's largest auditorium, on the 18th floor, the place Martin liked to call the heart of innovation. I arrived earlier than usual, not because I had any duty left there, but because I wanted to see for myself how cleanly a company could erase someone's name. The room glowed with light. The Horizon logo stretched across the entire back wall, LED panels reflecting off rows of restless employees. Ethan stood beside Martin on stage, adjusting his microphone, brown hair neat, smile confident, as if he'd been born for this moment. I sat in the third row, surrounded by people who used to work under me. A few nodded politely, but their eyes avoided mine. Maybe they thought I shouldn't have shown up. Martin began his speech with that calm, practiced voice. He talked about vision, about growth, about Horizon as not just a company, but a community of innovation where young ideas would shape the future. I felt nothing. Each word fell on my ears like a copy of a copy, except this time, every line was designed to write me out of the story. Then the slide appeared. Project Pulse Chain. 2.0, Strategic Innovation Lead, Ethan Cole. Below it, charts, plans, and data I had once spent nights perfecting. Ethan began his presentation, stumbling over a few technical points, but Martin stood beside him, filling the gaps with smooth ease until the room broke into uneven applause. Slide 12, Market Analysis. Every number, color, and phrasing was mine. I remembered each margin note, every punctuation mark, but I didn't feel anger, only a strange kind of stillness. So this is what it feels like, I thought, to watch yourself being replaced and stay calm enough to keep breathing. When the presentation ended, Martin scanned the crowd, his gaze landing exactly where I sat. "We need new thinking, not just old experience," he said, half to the audience, half to me. The room went quiet, then someone started clapping, and the rest followed. I clapped too. 3 quiet beats, just enough to blend in. When it was over, I slipped out while the others were still crowding around Ethan for photos. Martin's voice called after me. "Clara, wait a moment." I turned as he approached, smiling in that familiar, polished way. "What did you think?" he asked. "The kid's got potential, doesn't he?" I met his eyes. "He does," I said, "the potential to make mistakes without understanding why." Martin's smile tightened. "I know this isn't easy for you, but think of it as a learning opportunity. For him." I spoke softly, steadily. "People only learn when they face their mistakes, Martin. If someone keeps clearing the path for them, they'll never grow up." I left without looking back. In the lobby, Ethan was waiting. He walked over, hesitant. "I just wanted to say thank you," he said. "I know how much you've done for this project. I was only following orders." I smiled faintly. "I know. I used to be like you, thinking I was helping the company, when really I was helping others forget who built it." He stayed quiet. I placed a hand on his shoulder. "Don't worry, you'll learn that lesson soon enough." Back in my office, I checked my inbox. Amid hundreds of internal congratulations, one email from legal caught my eye. Confirmation. Your resignation takes effect in 12 days. I read it several times, then nodded. Everything was now official. I began sorting documents, archiving what the team would need, and deleting my personal files. I wasn't trying to make things difficult. I just wanted to leave cleanly. As I packed, Maya walked in and shut the door. "I watched the live stream," she said, and almost threw up. I laughed. "Don't. It's not worth it. I want them to think I'm defeated." Sometimes silence hits harder than any retaliation. She studied me, torn between worry and admiration. "Do you have a plan?" "I do," I said. "I'll let them discover the gap they thought didn't exist." "Martin isn't stupid," she warned. "He'll try to keep control." I tilted my head. He can keep control. I'm just withdrawing the right that lets his system run. By evening, I had printed the copyright agreements and intellectual property certificates, sealed them in an envelope, and placed it on my desk. Seeing my name at the bottom, Clara Jensen, owner, didn't make me proud. It simply reminded me that I hadn't imagined my worth. Before leaving for the last time, I sent one final email to the technical team. "I'll be leaving Horizon at the end of the month. Please keep Pulse Chain stable. If needed, contact me for license confirmation. Regards, Clara." I didn't add anything else. They wouldn't understand now, but in a few weeks, when the system requested license verification and no one had the authority to approve it, they would. I turned off the lights and stepped into the hallway. My footsteps echoed down the long corridor. When the elevator doors opened, I looked back once. The Horizon logo gleamed faintly in the reflection. Some names only shine as long as someone keeps the fire alive. That night, I delivered the printed resignation letter to legal. No farewell note, no announcement. Just a single message left on my desk. "Don't ask why I left. Ask why I stayed this long." Then I walked out into the rain. The drops fell on my coat, steady and soft, like the final countdown of a chapter closing. I didn't know what would happen to Horizon next, but I knew one thing with absolute certainty. I no longer belonged there. 2 weeks after I left Horizon, my personal inbox started filling with short, frantic messages. At first, they were simple requests from former coworkers asking for the old system guide. Then came longer ones, rushed and full of panic. "Clara, Pulse Chain isn't syncing data anymore. Operations is reporting a license failure." Ethan tried to access admin privileges, but got blocked. I read each line carefully, then turned off my phone and set it aside. I didn't reply. Not because I wanted to watch them struggle, but because I had done my part. I had warned them. I remembered that last night in the office when I added the security line that required license verification every time the administrator changed. It was a legal clause. No one could say I was wrong. I was simply exercising my rights. Now, Horizon would have to renegotiate the license if it wanted Pulse Chain to run again. And to do that, they needed my signature. Rumors spread fast. A week later, an internal company forum post went viral. They said Pulse Chain had been temporarily suspended due to a technical issue. Martin sent a company-wide email insisting it was just a small glitch that would soon be fixed. But everyone who had worked with me knew better. Pulse Chain didn't glitch. It simply followed the rules. Maya called me that Wednesday afternoon, her voice low and tense. "Do you know what's happening?" she asked. "The entire supply chain management system shut down this morning. Major clients are demanding a meeting with Martin." I stayed quiet. "I guess he never read the contract thoroughly, did he?" She sighed. "They're blaming the tech team, but the engineers say the license expired, and you're the only one authorized to renew it." I smiled faintly. Then they already know who to call. I wasn't cruel. I didn't want Horizon to collapse. But if a company is built on forgetting, then collapse is just how it remembers. On the 10th day after I left, I got an email from Ethan. "Clara, I really need your help. The system won't respond. Martin's furious. He says you're sabotaging us, but I know you wouldn't. Please, just tell me how to fix it." I read the message several times before replying with a single line. "Ethan, Pulse Chain only responds to those who understand it. Look for clause 9.2 in the contract and nothing more." The next day, Maya sent me a screenshot of an internal email from Martin. Subject line, "Urgent. Need to restore Pulse Chain access." He had written, "If anyone has contact information for Clara Jensen, send it to me immediately." Below, an employee suggested hiring a lawyer to petition the court for access. I exhaled through a quiet laugh. Martin had never known how to admit fault. For him, everything was about control, never justice. That afternoon, I sat in my usual cafe, rain streaking the glass, city lights blurring outside. I opened my laptop to Pulse Chain's main console, the same system Horizon could no longer touch. Everything ran smoothly, except for HE modules they no longer owned. I typed a short note into my private file. No action needed. Let them learn how to read a clause. 2 days later, Maya called again, her voice a mix of shock and disbelief. "Clara, they're panicking. Major clients like FreightNet and SwiftHaul just suspended contracts, citing loss of legal administrator." I nodded, even though she couldn't see me. "What's Martin saying? He's furious." Slammed his desk, yelled at everyone, but I think he's starting to realize he's in trouble. The following day, I received another email, this one from an unfamiliar address, legal@horizoндynamics.com. It read, "We request your cooperation in restoring the Pulse Chain license to prevent corporate losses. If not, we will pursue legal action." It was signed by Horizon's chief counsel, the same man who once called me frighteningly thorough. When I finalized the Pulse Chain agreement, I replied with one sentence: "Any legal action will only prove that I followed the law." That evening, Ethan called. I wasn't going to answer, but I did. He appeared on screen, sitting in his office, eyes tired, face tight. "They're losing control, Clara," he said. "Martin blames me, says I broke the system, but I only followed your setup." I looked at him calmly. "Ethan, don't blame yourself. You were just the mask they chose. When everything falls apart, someone always has to take the blame. But you can help, right?" I shook my head. "Not anymore." When the call ended, I sat still for a long time. I didn't feel joy or satisfaction, only an emptiness, the kind that comes from watching a house you built start to crack. 3 days later, the story went public. A tech news outlet published a short piece. Horizon Dynamics Pulse Chain Logistics Platform temporarily halted due to legal dispute over ownership rights. I stared at the headline and took a slow sip of coffee. They didn't mention my name, but everyone in the industry knew who was behind the silence in those words. That afternoon, Maya sent one last message. Ethan just tried to reboot the system. It locked him out. Martin lost his temper. The room went dead quiet. I replied, "They'll find a way to unlock it eventually. But not with a password, with a lesson." As night fell, I stood by the window, rain still pouring against the glass. I didn't feel like I'd taken revenge. I'd simply let justice run its own course, just like Pulse Chain itself, precise, fair, and impartial. And in that moment, I realized something. Sometimes the sharpest weapon isn't anger. It's the strength to walk away and let them face the void they created. About 2 weeks after Pulse Chain went offline, Horizon officially filed a lawsuit against me, accusing me of misappropriating intellectual property and causing financial harm to the company. When Maya texted me the news, I just stared at the screen for a moment, then smiled. Everything was happening exactly as I had predicted. Martin Graves couldn't stand losing control, and suing me was his last attempt to save face. On a rainy morning, I sat in my small office at Apex Strategy. It wasn't fancy, just a desk, a laptop, and the little plant I'd kept since the day I left Horizon. On the screen, an email from the court appeared, requesting the defendant's attendance at a preliminary hearing on the 15th. I clicked it open and read carefully. There was nothing to fear. I knew that contract better than anyone at Horizon. They were attacking the one place I had built the strongest. That evening, Maya came by. Her hair was wet from the rain, her face tense. "Clara, they're serious," she said. "Martin's telling everyone you sabotaged the company. They hired one of the top law firms in Seattle. If the court freezes Apex's account, you could lose everything." I handed her a cup of tea. "I know," I said, "and they will do it." Her eyes widened. "You sound like you don't care." I smiled softly. "It's not that I don't care. It's what I planned for this. Sometimes, to prove the truth, you have to let them walk the full length of the wrong road." 3 days later, the story leaked. Business Tech ran a headline that read, "Former Horizon Dynamics executive accused of intellectual property theft." Beneath it was a photo of me taken at a conference last year, light falling across half my face. They chose the one that made me look cold, detached. I didn't respond. In the world of media, silence often speaks louder than defense. The day of the hearing, Martin arrived in a gray suit, confident as if victory were guaranteed. Ethan sat in the back row, head bowed, avoiding my gaze. When the judge asked Horizon's counsel to begin, their attorney stood and spoke firmly. "Your Honor, the defendant intentionally inserted restrictive clauses that caused the pulse chain system to halt, resulting in damages estimated at $8.7 million. My attorney, a small woman with a calm but precise voice, rose to speak. "Your Honor, every clause the plaintiff mentions was reviewed, approved, and signed by Mr. Martin Graves himself. We have clear documentation to prove this." The room went silent. Martin frowned, not understanding yet. My lawyer opened her laptop and projected a chain of internal emails, messages from Martin to me that read, "Looks fine, proceed." And on the signature page, in his own handwriting, "Good job, Clara." I looked at him without a word. She continued, "We would also like to present Exhibit B12, the official meeting minutes from March 22nd of last year, where Mr. Graves agreed to grant intellectual property ownership to Ms. Jensen to preserve her independent research rights." The judge reviewed the file, nodded once. "Clearly, the signatures are here." Martin's composure cracked. "That was just a formality," he shouted. "I didn't think she'd use it against me." The judge tapped his gavel lightly. "Please remain orderly, Mr. Graves." I stayed silent, meeting his eyes with calm steadiness. I didn't need to win with my voice. I only needed the law to finish the rest. After the hearing, reporters waited outside. One of them asked, "Do you have any comment on the accusation that you intentionally caused Horizon's downfall?" I replied evenly, "I didn't cause anything to fall. I simply took back the part they once decided didn't matter." A week later, the court issued its preliminary ruling, dismissing Horizon's claim and ordering them to accept legal responsibility for using intellectual property they did not own. Apex Strategies accounts were unfrozen that same day. That night, Maya and I sat in a small riverside bar. She raised her glass, eyes bright after days of worry. "I can't believe you actually won. How are you so calm through all of it?" I took a sip, watching the reflection of city lights shimmer on the water. "Because I knew I was right. People only panic when they are unsure of where they stand. I never was." Maya was quiet for a while, then said softly, "Martin must be losing his mind." I smiled. "I don't need to know. I just hope he finally learned what I told him years ago. Never sign something you don't understand, especially when the other person does." That night, back home, I opened my laptop. My inbox overflowed with messages of congratulations. A few old Horizon colleagues sent apologies. Ethan wrote too. "I'm sorry for staying silent during the hearing. I didn't know he'd sue you." I just want you to know I didn't agree with it. I replied, It's all right, Ethan. You just learned the lesson we all do eventually. Loyalty never replaces understanding. I closed the laptop and leaned back in my chair. The feeling wasn't triumph, just relief. I had finished the first half of this war, the one where you don't shout, don't strike back, and let the truth speak for itself. Horizon thought they were attacking me, but really, they had just pulled the curtain over their own cracks. When I turned off the lights, the room fell silent. Outside, the city glowed, unaware of the small battle between one woman and a corporation. But in that quiet, I knew the storm had only just begun, and next time I wouldn't be on defense. News of the trial spread faster than any marketing campaign Horizon had ever launched. The media called it a battle of intellect in the tech world, and even though I said nothing, the name Clara Jensen began appearing in articles about creative rights and underestimated women in technology. I hadn't predicted how far it would go, but I knew one thing for sure: the war in the shadows had stepped into the light. 2 days after the verdict, my phone wouldn't stop ringing. Friends called to congratulate me, and reporters asked for interviews. But what caught my eye most was an email from FreightNet, one of Horizon's largest clients. The subject line read, Need to talk urgently. When I opened it, the CEO had written a short message. We want to discuss transferring the Pulse Chain contract to Apex Strategy. Clara, can you meet us this afternoon? I stared at that line for a moment, then smiled. I didn't need revenge. They were coming to me on their own. The meeting took place in my small office, just a table and a few plain chairs. The FreightNet CEO, the same man who once refused to speak to me while I was at Horizon, shook my hand firmly. We need you, he said. Since you left, the system hasn't run properly. We know who really built Pulse Chain. I answered calmly. I don't intend to take anything from Horizon, but if they can't deliver, I can. He nodded without hesitation. The contract will be sent today. Within 2 weeks, Apex Strategy had 3 new clients, all former Horizon partners. They didn't come to me for revenge, but for reliability. I hadn't promoted anything. Results spoke for themselves. Maya texted me, You're trending now. They're calling you the ghost of Pulse Chain. I laughed. If I have to be a ghost, at least I'm one they still fear. That afternoon, Ethan called. His voice was deeper, steadier. I just wanted to thank you, he said. I read the contract carefully this time. Now I understand why you did what you did, I asked. How's Martin treating you? He hesitated. He's desperate. The investors are pushing hard. Some board members are already talking about replacing him. I sighed. Don't celebrate that, Ethan. When a system collapses, it drags down the innocent, too. He was quiet for a moment, then said, I'd like to work with you if there's a chance. I raised an eyebrow. You're leaving Horizon. I can't stand working in a place ruled by fear instead of trust, he said. I nodded gently. All right, but this time, you'll learn to take responsibility for what you sign. He laughed softly. I promise. A week later, Ethan resigned. When he came to Apex, his eyes looked different, no longer naive, but shaped by what he'd endured. I handed him a new contract with the title Junior Analyst. He read it and smiled. You're really letting me start from scratch, I said. That's the best way to learn. Meanwhile, Horizon kept unraveling. Martin tried to reassure the board that everything was under control, but major clients continued to pull out. One analyst wrote, When the creator leaves, you can keep the source code, but not the mindset behind it. I read that line and thought, that's more accurate than any defense I could ever give. Late one night, Maya texted, Martin's under board investigation for mismanagement. Word is, he's about to be suspended. I replied, not surprised. Then she added, Ethan is working out all right. I smiled. He makes mistakes, but he learns fast. Maybe after everything, I didn't just lose a job. I gained a real ally. In the days that followed, Apex became busier. Ethan and I worked long hours, checking every line of code, optimizing systems for new clients. I didn't feel tired. Every time the light from my screen reflected on the glass, I remembered the nights I sat alone at Horizon, ignored and unseen. Now, I chose who I worked with, and that freedom felt unlike anything I'd known before. One afternoon, Maya stopped by with coffee. I still don't understand how you stay so calm, she said. You have every right to celebrate, but you never do. I smiled. I don't need to celebrate. I didn't win over anyone. I just reclaimed what was already mine. She looked at me, her eyes soft. You know, that's exactly why people respect you. After she left, I turned back to my desk. Outside, the sunset spilled through the window, red and bright, painting the walls in light. I opened a small wooden box on my desk, the original contract between me and Horizon, the paper edges slightly worn. I kept it not out of bitterness, but as a reminder that true worth is always something you must protect, whether through silence or through action. I stuck a note to the whiteboard in front of me. Never beg for a seat when you can build your own table. I looked at the words and smiled softly. For the first time in years, I finally understood what freedom really meant. Not when you walk away from the past, but when you no longer want to go back. News that Horizon lost the FreightNet contract spread across the industry in a single night. Tech media started calling it a historic fall of a logistics star. I didn't offer any commentary, but emails from former clients kept coming. Some asked if I could help restore their systems. Others proposed long-term consulting. I chose carefully, taking only the deals I could personally manage. I didn't want Apex to become another Horizon. I had learned that growing fast isn't the same as being solid. One Monday morning, Ethan walked into the office with a tablet in hand, his face tight. "You should see this," he said, and handed me a leaked clip. It was a Horizon board meeting. Martin stood there, voice harsh. "We can't let her control everything from the outside. We have to prove that technology doesn't rely on Jensen alone." A board member said quietly, "But all the copyrights and core algorithms belong to her." Martin slammed the table. "I run this company, not her." I stopped the clip and set the tablet down. "He's lost his bearings." Ethan nodded. "They're rebuild pulse chain from scratch, but no one understands the original structure. I heard from an old engineer that if they tweak a single line wrong, the whole system could break for good." I looked out the window at a Seattle wrapped in early morning mist. Maybe they need to try it themselves to learn the cost of not respecting what they had. That afternoon, an email arrived from an unfamiliar address with 3 words: "Can we talk?" I knew who it was. I didn't reply. An hour later, my phone rang. "Martin." I let it go to the third ring before answering. "I'm listening." His voice was lower, more tired than the last time we spoke. "Clara, can we meet? I want to talk." I kept my voice even. "I don't think there's anything left for us to discuss." "Please," he said quickly. "Just one meeting. I need your help." I paused. "I don't work for Horizon anymore." "No, but you understand it better than anyone. And you know if Pulse Chain dies, hundreds of people will lose their jobs." I closed my eyes for a moment. Martin had finally learned to beg, but only for his own survival. I said, "I'll think about it." I barely slept that night. I thought about my 3 years at Horizon, the endless meetings, the nights coding alone, the way Martin erased my work with a half joke and a smirk. I left to be free, but freedom sometimes means facing old wounds head on. The next morning, I agreed to meet him. We chose a cafe near South Lake Union, where I had first sketched out Pulse Chain. When I arrived, Martin was already there. He looked older, gray at the edges, with dark circles under his eyes. He stood, tried to smile, and failed. "Thank you for coming," he said. I nodded. "I don't have much time. Say what you need to say." Martin stared into his coffee, hesitating. "I know I was wrong. I thought I could control everything, but you proved otherwise. Pulse Chain is collapsing. We've lost almost all our major contracts. I need you to come back, at least temporarily, to bring the system back. I'll sign whatever terms you want." I watched him for a long moment. "And when I'm done, what then? Wipe my name off the reports again." He shook his head quickly. "No, this time will be different. I promise." I smiled, tired more than amused. "You used to say innovation comes from youth, remember? Now you're asking the person you called too old to save what you lost." He bowed his head and said nothing. I exhaled. "Martin, I'll help, but not for you. For the people at Horizon who don't deserve to sink with you." I proposed a short consulting agreement with clear terms. I would support the technology only, with no role in internal operations. He agreed immediately, barely skimming the pages. When we finished signing, I said, "I'll assign someone to work on site. I'm not coming back to that office. He nodded, gratitude and exhaustion mixing in his eyes. 3 days later, I sent Ethan to Horizon. He looked startled. You trust me that much? I smiled. It's not trust, it's a lesson. You need to see the price of arrogance with your own eyes. He worked 3 straight days there, then returned with shadows under his eyes. They're a mess, Clara. No one understands how the system actually runs. Martin's trying to hide from the board that he hired you as a consultant, but I think they'll find out soon. I said only, they always know, they just pretend not to. By the weekend, the first report arrived. Pulse chain was partially restored, and major clients had begun to return. Martin sent a thank you note with one more line. You've always been the irreplaceable part. I didn't reply. I didn't need to hear it anymore. The next day, Maya came by with a tech magazine that had my photo on the cover. The headline read, The woman who made the system rewrite its own rules. She grinned. You've become a symbol. I shook my head. No, I just had the luck to see the game's true face earlier than most. After she left, I looked out the window as spring light stretched across the rain-damp street. I thought about Horizon, about Martin, about the people still trying to save the company, and I realized I wasn't angry anymore. Anger had kept me moving. Forgiveness was what finally made me feel light. I opened my laptop and typed a short email to Martin. The project is stable. I'm ending my advisory role here. I wish you and your team success. When I hit send, it felt like setting down an old weight. Maybe, sometimes, winning doesn't require proving who's right or wrong. It just takes the courage to walk away a second time, and this time, for good. 3 months after I ended my advisory role, Horizon officially announced a restructuring. Martin Graves stepped down as CEO for personal reasons, but everyone in the industry knew he'd been forced out. A younger face took his place, someone who had once served as a strategy consultant for Horizon's main investor. The press release was barely 200 words, but it marked the end of an era. I read the news on a Monday morning while sitting by the window in my Apex office. The early light cut through the glass and spilled across my laptop screen, where another headline glowed. FreightNet signs 3-year expansion deal with Apex Strategy. I didn't smile. I just felt calm. Life rarely gives you both justice and opportunity at the same time, but if you wait long enough, it finds its own balance. Ethan walked in and placed a cup of coffee on my desk. They just made it official, he said. Martin's out. Half the board has changed too. I nodded. Good for them. Maybe now they'll learn to listen. He looked at me, half curious, half admiring. Aren't you happy? They hurt you once. I shook my head. If I still find joy in their fall, it means I'm still trapped in their past, and I'm done being bound by that. He smiled quietly. I think I get it. Sometimes winning isn't about making someone else lose. It's realizing you don't need to win anymore. I looked at him and nodded. Exactly. That day, Apex was busier than ever. We'd just signed 2 new clients, both former Horizon partners. Maya handled finance, and Ethan oversaw operations. Watching them work, I realized I had unintentionally built another version of Horizon, but this one belonged to people who respected each other. That afternoon, a white envelope arrived by courier with no return address. Inside was a handwritten card. Thank you for showing me what I refused to see. M. I knew who it was from. Martin, proud as he was, still knew when silence was the only way to bow out. I folded the card and placed it in my drawer. No reply needed. Some stories should end in quiet. That weekend, Apex held a small quarterly dinner. No champagne, no long speeches, just a simple meal. When everyone raised their glasses, Maya smiled at me. You know, if Horizon hadn't pushed you out, you might still be there, enduring instead of building. I laughed softly. I know. Sometimes losing isn't failure. It's the reminder that you were in the wrong place. Laughter filled the room. I sat for a while, watching them. Young faces, bright eyes, fearless. They didn't know everything I had gone through, but they were living inside a workplace born from those lessons. After dinner, I walked along Lake Union. The city lights shimmered on the water. I thought of the first day I entered Horizon, believing hard work alone would earn respect. I was wrong, but I needed that mistake. Without it, I'd never have learned the worth of building my own road. My phone buzzed. Ethan. Hey, Tomorrow's meeting with the new client. Do you want me to lead the presentation? I smiled. Are you confident? I think so. Then do it. It's time you stood where I once stood. He laughed. I won't make your mistakes. Good, I said. But if you do, remember, sometimes the right mistake is worth more than the wrong success. I hung up and looked up at the Seattle sky, a few stars scattered but clear. Maybe everyone needs time to realize that revenge isn't the ending. It's just the beginning of a different version of yourself, one that no longer needs anyone's approval to feel whole. A few months later, I received an invitation to speak at a conference on creative rights and women in tech leadership. I hadn't planned to accept, but Maya said, "You should. Some stories need to be told, not to brag, but to remind others they're not alone." I agreed. At the conference, I said, "People often say I won because I was clever, but really, I just dared to walk away. If I learned anything, it's that to protect your worth, sometimes you have to let go of everything you once thought defined it." The room was silent for a moment. Then the applause came, steady, not loud, like the rhythm of genuine understanding. That night, back in my office under dim light, I opened an old folder, the pulse chain plans from years ago. I didn't feel anger or regret, just gratitude. Because without Horizon, without Martin, without those years of being overlooked, I wouldn't have become who I am. I shut the laptop and looked out at the city. Across the lake, Horizon's tower was still lit, but that light no longer stung. I smiled faintly and whispered, "Good luck, Martin. Thank you for teaching me how to stand on my own." Then I turned back to my desk and wrote the final line in my new project journal. "Tomorrow, the Apollo trial phase begins. Don't forget why it started." I set the pen down and exhaled softly. Outside, the Seattle wind carried a chill through the open window, but inside I felt warm, as if, at last, everything had settled exactly where it was meant to be.